Pooh Shiesty's daddy been a rat since '09, and his son a mice since 2022.
The fucking footage is going to show. Only person who really gonna escape from this is the Pops. The Pops did not want none of this to go on. Nigga like this, bro. Gucci look at the dad like,
Congressman, I'm right here with Big Mob Boss. We down here for Pooh Shiesty going down. We just got off the phone with Pooh. Not playing. We've been in here all day talking to how many times?
Shiesty's dad confronts feds in court, and what's coming out of this case is raising more questions than answers. Inside that courtroom, his father isn't backing down. He's arguing that the federal government doesn't have the proof they claim, that they're holding him without clear and convincing evidence. And that alone is enough to turn heads. Because when someone challenges the feds that directly, it usually means there's more happening behind the scenes.
Yeah. Apparently, Pooh Shiesty's dad secretly been a snitch this whole time. So it's like your daddy's your first codeine, and your daddy's probably gonna tell you. It's about to turn into one of those, and then you find out his dad told, this might turn into that.
And don't worry, there's 7 others.
There's 7 other co-defendants. 8 other co-defendants, including Big 30.
But this isn't just about one man fighting for bond. This entire situation is tied to a much bigger and far more explosive story, one that centers around shocking allegations involving Gucci Mane. According to prosecutors, what was supposed to be a simple studio session in Dallas turned into something much darker, involving claims of intimidation, forced paperwork, and a deal gone completely off track.
Lontrell Williams Jr. arranged this meeting purportedly to discuss the terms of his recording contract with one of the victims. As alleged, Williams Jr. produced an AK-style pistol and forced one of the victims to sign a release from the recording contract at gunpoint.
And just when you think the story couldn't get more unpredictable, voices from outside the courtroom start adding fuel to the fire. Wack 100, a controversial figure known for speaking bluntly, claims he once saw Pooh Shiesty moving with hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, allegedly sliding through an airport with $300,000 in a duffel bag. No security, no hesitation, just risk. It paints a picture that's hard to ignore.
He had $300,000 cash in a duffel bag with some house slippers. I said, yo, bro, how you get to the airport? He said, shit, we slid through, bro. We had some clothes on the top, we slid through. This was in Simi Valley. I was there with
fast money, fast decisions, and maybe a mindset that was already heading toward trouble long before any federal case began. Now you've got courtroom arguments on one side, street-level stories on the other, and a major artist's name caught in the middle. Nothing about this situation feels simple, but the deeper you look, the less this story adds up. Before the headlines, before the court filings, there was momentum and a rise that happened almost too fast to process. Pooh Shiesty didn't just enter the rap scene quietly, he exploded onto it. Backed by Gucci Mane's 1007 label, his name started ringing out everywhere almost overnight. Cosigns, viral tracks, industry attention, it all came rushing in at once. And with that kind of spotlight comes money, access, and influence most artists take years to build. From the outside, it looks like everything was lining up perfectly. But behind that success, there were moments that, in hindsight, feel different. That's where Wack 100's story starts to stand out. He recalls meeting Pooh Shiesty in California and immediately noticing something about his energy. According to him, Shiesty was carrying around $300,000 in cash, just sitting in a bag, moving casually, like it was nothing. Even more surprising was how he allegedly got it through the airport, describing it as simply sliding through without drawing attention. Whether exaggerated or not, the story highlights a certain mindset, one that doesn't fully account for consequences. Wack even claims he tried to warn him, told him that moving like that could lead to serious problems.
You know, he had $300,000 cash in a duffel bag with some house slippers.
How'd you know he had $300,000 in cash?
He showed it to me.
He showed you $300,000
with one
cash.
dude. And I told him, I said, yo, bro, you shouldn't be moving like that. They could take that from one. Two, you out here in LA, you got house slippers. You know what I'm saying? I said, a lot of these people on these sets, they be tied to things. But I could see it in his eyes that he was kind of like, I don't want to call him a crash dummy.
Not just financially, but legally, especially in a place like Los Angeles where connections and hidden risks run deep. But those warnings didn't seem to land, and looking back now, some people believe those moments weren't just random stories, they were early signs, not of guilt, not of crime, but of a pattern, fast decisions. high-risk choices, a sense of invincibility that often comes with sudden success, because what came next wasn't just a setback, it was a complete shift into something far more serious. And then everything spiraled into a federal case. At the center of this entire situation is one incident, an alleged encounter that prosecutors say changed everything. According to federal authorities, a meeting was set up at a recording studio in Dallas. On the surface, it looked like business as usual, artists linking up, conversations about music, possibly even contract discussions, nothing out of the ordinary for the industry. But prosecutors claim that meeting took a turn. They allege that Gucci Mane was placed in a situation where he was no longer in control, that he was threatened and forced to sign paperwork releasing Pooh Shiesty from his 1315 contract.
The complaint alleges that on January 10th of this year, 3 music industry professionals traveled to Dallas for a scheduled business meeting. Lontrell Williams Jr. arranged this meeting purportedly to discuss the terms of his recording contract with one of the victims. As alleged, once these 3 men were inside the recording studio, Williams Jr. and 8 co-conspirators executed a coordinated armed takeover. As alleged, Williams Jr. produced an AK-style pistol and forced one of the victims to sign a release from the recording contract at gunpoint.
The claims go even further, describing it as an orchestrated move disguised as a routine studio session. If true, it's not just industry drama, it's a serious federal case involving accusations of robbery and coercion, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Multiple individuals have been charged in connection to the incident, and if convicted, they could be facing decades behind bars, possibly even life sentences depending on how the charges play out. But here's where things start to get complicated. Because while prosecutors are confident in their version of events, the people closest to the situation are telling a very different story. Some are questioning the details, others are outright denying involvement, and key figures are pushing back against the idea that this was some carefully planned operation. So now, instead of one clear narrative, there are 2 completely different versions of what happened inside that studio, and the gap between them is only getting wider. But the people closest to the situation are pushing back hard. Inside the courtroom, Lontrell Williams Sr. isn't just responding to the charges, he's directly challenging the foundation of the government's case. Through newly filed legal documents, he's making one argument crystal clear: the feds don't have enough evidence to justify keeping him behind bars. His legal team is leaning heavily on a key standard, clear and convincing evidence, and they're saying that standard simply hasn't been met. That argument carries weight, especially because a judge had already looked at this situation once before and came to a different conclusion.
Occurred were very questionable. I think the way that the statements were made, what allegedly was witnessed and what wasn't witnessed, I think gave great pause to the FBI. The FBI doesn't take 3 months to arrest someone if they believe everything that was said on the night that it occurred.
Earlier this month, Judge Christoph reviewed Williams' background, his personal history, his characteristics, and the details of the case and decided he should be granted bond. That decision suggests the court didn't initially view him as a serious threat or a flight risk. And that's exactly what Williams is doubling down on now. He's telling the court that he is not a danger to the community, and more importantly, that the government hasn't proven otherwise. His defense is framing this as an overreaching attempt to keep him locked up, based more on assumptions than solid proof. But just as quickly as that bond was granted, federal prosecutors stepped in and appealed the decision, putting everything on hold. Now, instead of walking free under conditions, Williams is stuck waiting, caught in a legal tug-of-war between a judge who saw room for release and prosecutors who are determined to keep him detained. It's a high-stakes back and forth, and every detail matters. Because if his argument holds up, it doesn't just affect whether he gets out, it starts to reshape how this entire case is viewed. And his biggest claim might change how people see the entire situation. At the center of Williams' defense is a direct rejection of how prosecutors are portraying him. According to the government's version of events, he's being positioned as a key figure, someone deeply involved in what allegedly happened inside that Dallas studio. But Williams is pushing back hard against that image. He's not just denying involvement, he's questioning whether he was even there in the way prosecutors claim. In court filings, his legal team disputes the idea that he was present and actively directing anything. They specifically reject the accusation that he played a role in forcing Gucci Mane to sign paperwork. And then comes a detail that shifts the tone of the entire argument. Even when looking at the case in the light most favorable to the prosecution, the judge's own words suggest something very different. According to those observations, the evidence may only show that Williams stood by rather than orchestrated anything. That's a major distinction, because there's a big difference between being accused of leading a situation and simply being nearby when something happens. And that gap is exactly what the defense is trying to widen. On one side, prosecutors are building a narrative of coordination and intent. On the other, the defense is stripping that narrative down, piece by piece, arguing that the claims don't match what can actually be proven. What you're left with is a case full of contradictions, two completely different versions of the same moment, both fighting for credibility. And as those narratives collide, the uncertainty only grows, because Williams isn't the only one pushing back against how this story is being told. And he's not the only one caught in this legal storm. Running parallel to Williams's fight is another case that's adding even more complexity to the situation, Big 30's battle for release. Just like Williams, Big 30 was initially granted bond. In his case, it was set at $100,000, a decision that suggested the court saw a path for him to be released under conditions. But once again, federal prosecutors moved quickly to shut that down.
Initially, I guess she found that there was probable cause for the case to move forward. And then today, in the detention hearing, she did grant him a bond of a secure bond of $100,000. U.S. Attorney's Office in the Northern District of Dallas is going to file an appeal, and they're going to appeal the judge's decision, and we will have to have another detention hearing in Texas.
Almost immediately, leaving him detained while a higher court reviews whether he should remain behind bars or be allowed out under strict supervision. And just like Williams, Big 30's legal team is pushing back hard. Their argument centers on one key idea: he's being portrayed as more involved than he actually was. According to his attorneys, the actions prosecutors can point to, like retrieving a bag or recording video, don't show leadership, planning, or escalation. Instead, they suggest a more limited role, one that doesn't justify the level of responsibility being placed on him. But prosecutors see it differently. They argue that Big 30 poses a potential flight risk, pointing to a major record deal reportedly worth significant
And so he
money.
questioned if the government will bring a case, will have a case, because Gucci Mane is not cooperating. He said it will make it hard for them to do that.
In their
Live
view,
downtown.
that kind of opportunity could give him a reason to leave rather than face trial. The defense flips that argument completely. They claim that same record deal is actually a reason for him to stay. That his career, his obligations, and his future earnings all depend on him complying with the court and showing up. They also highlight personal ties, his roots in Memphis, his family, his lack of prior felony convictions, all factors meant to show stability, not risk. So once again, it comes down to perspective. Is he a key player trying to avoid consequences, or someone caught in a situation that's being overstated? Now you've got multiple defendants, multiple legal strategies, and multiple versions of the truth all unfolding at the same time. And while the courtroom is trying to sort through facts, timelines, and evidence, outside of it, a completely different conversation is taking over. Because beyond the legal filings and official statements, the internet has already started forming its own theories. But outside the courtroom, the internet has its own theories. While the courtroom is focused on evidence and legal arguments, outside of it, a completely different narrative is taking shape, and it's moving fast. Online platforms have been flooded with reactions, breakdowns, and theories, with voices like 1090 Jake adding fuel to the conversation. His commentary doesn't claim to prove anything, but it does highlight what a lot of people are already thinking. Some parts of this story just don't seem to line up. One of the biggest points of confusion centers around the alleged Dallas studio incident itself.
It's just wild, and not for nothing, growing up on Gucci too, like Gucci had a lot of people crashing out and living what he was rapping, and that's why a lot of people feel some type of way. And everybody, oh, Gucci's a businessman. He's a businessman. That man's been talking about on Pookie Loke for 20 years.
According to the prosecution, this was a coordinated situation involving pressure and forced paperwork. But critics online are questioning the details, how it allegedly happened, who was involved, and whether the sequence of events makes sense the way it's being described. There's also debate around the reported actions during the incident. Some online commentators question why certain items would be taken or how specific moments unfolded, suggesting that the scenario, as told publicly, raises more questions than it answers. Again, these are unverified interpretations, but they've gained traction because of how unusual the claims sound to the average listener. And then there's Gucci Mane. His name carries weight not just in music, but in reputation. For years, he's built an image tied to authenticity, control, and authority in the industry. So when reports surfaced describing him as being put in a vulnerable position, it didn't match what many fans believed about him. That disconnect is where a lot of the speculation lives. Some people are questioning whether the situation has been accurately described. Others are wondering if key details are missing. And then there are those who believe the full story hasn't come out yet at all. At the same time, there's noticeable silence from major figures connected to the situation. No clear public breakdown, no detailed explanation, just fragments of information coming from legal filings, media reports, and outside commentary. And when there's silence in a situation this big, people tend to fill in the gaps themselves. What you're left with is a mix of official claims, legal defenses, and public speculation, all overlapping but not always aligning, which makes it harder to separate what's proven, what's alleged, and what's simply being assumed. And that's where things get even more complicated. When you step back and look at everything as a whole, this case becomes more than just a single incident. It turns into a layered story with real consequences on every side. On one end, you have a father standing in court, pushing back against federal claims and insisting there isn't enough evidence to justify his detention. On another, you have prosecutors building a case they believe shows coordination, intent, and serious criminal behavior. In between that, there are other names like Big 30 caught in the same situation, each with their own legal battles, their own arguments, and their own futures hanging in the balance. And the stakes couldn't be higher. We're not just talking about headlines or online debates. We're talking about potential life-altering outcomes, years behind bars, careers put on hold, reputations permanently shaped by what happens next. At the same time, the public is watching all of this unfold in real time, trying to piece together a story that still feels incomplete. Court documents reveal one side. Defense filings push back with another, and outside voices continue to interpret everything in between. The truth is, right now, there isn't a single clear narrative that everyone agrees on. There are claims, there are denials, there are questions that haven't been fully answered, and until the legal process plays out, that uncertainty isn't going anywhere. Which leaves one question that keeps coming up the deeper you look into this situation. Was this a calculated move, a misunderstanding, or something far more chaotic happening behind the scenes? Because depending on how that question gets answered, everything about this story could change. And right now, people are still trying to figure out what's real and what isn't. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you. If you enjoyed this breakdown, show some love. Hit that like button, subscribe to Rap Hop Insider for all the latest, and turn on notifications so you never miss a drop. Catch you in the next one. Peace.